Welcome back to another hidden war story on USA Uncovered. In 1962, at the height of the Cold War, the United States government approved a plan so disturbing it remained hidden from the public for decades. The proposal called for bombings, hijackings, and staged terrorist attacks against American civilians, not by enemies of the United States, but by elements within its own military establishment. The operation was known as Operation Northwoods. The objective was simple: create enough public outrage to justify a full-scale invasion of Cuba. The documents were real, the signatures were authentic, and the plan came directly from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officials in America. Had President John F. Kennedy approved the proposal, history might have unfolded very differently. This is the story of Operation Northwoods, the declassified Cold War plan that revealed just how far governments were willing to go in the name of national security. By early 1962, Cuba had become one of the most dangerous flashpoints on Earth. Just 90 miles from the coast of Florida, Fidel Castro's communist government had aligned itself with the Soviet Union. For Washington, this wasn't simply a political problem, it was a direct strategic threat sitting on America's doorstep. Only 1 year earlier, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion had embarrassed the Kennedy administration and strengthened Castro's position. Now the Cold War was escalating rapidly. Across Latin America, American officials feared Soviet influence was spreading. Inside the Pentagon, many military leaders believed Cuba was only the beginning. Among them was General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. To Lemnitzer and others, Castro represented far more than a hostile leader. He represented the possibility of Soviet expansion into the Western Hemisphere. But there was a problem. The American public had little appetite for another military operation. Disaster at the Bay of Pigs. President Kennedy made his position clear. Any direct action against Cuba would require undeniable justification, something dramatic enough to unite public opinion and silence international criticism. The Joint Chiefs understood exactly what that meant. In March 1962, they delivered a proposal to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Its codename was Operation Northwoods. Its purpose was chilling: manufacture the justification for war. What followed was a 13-page document outlining false flag operations so extreme they would sound fictional if the original paperwork didn't still exist inside the National Archives. The Northwoods document did not hide its intentions. It opened with a blunt proposal. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. The plans were detailed, calculated, designed to maximize public outrage. One proposal called for attacks against the American naval base at Guantanamo Bay. Military personnel would secretly stage incidents against their own facilities, then blame Cuban forces. Some casualties could be fabricated, others could be real. Another proposal suggested sinking a boat carrying Cuban refugees fleeing toward Florida. The deaths would be blamed on Castro's government. The victims would become political symbols, used to build support for military intervention. But perhaps the most disturbing plan involved civilian aircraft. According to the documents, a commercial flight would secretly land at a military base after takeoff. The passengers would be removed under false identities. A drone aircraft disguised as the original plane would then continue the route. At a predetermined moment, the drone would broadcast a distress call. The transmission would claim the aircraft was under attack by Cuban MiGs. Then the plane would be destroyed over the ocean. Search teams would find no survivors. The public would believe innocent American civilians had been murdered by Cuba. The documents even discussed publishing casualty lists, holding funerals, and creating fake evidence for the media. Every detail was carefully designed to manufacture fear, anger, and public support for war. These were not rough ideas. They were operational plans awaiting presidential approval. On March 13, 1962, General Lemnitzer presented Operation Northwoods to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. The reaction was immediate. McNamara rejected the proposal outright. The operation was too dangerous, too unethical, and too unpredictable. But the Joint Chiefs did not immediately back down. The plans were revised, the language was softened, and the proposal was submitted again. The new version still contained false flag attacks, fabricated evidence, and manipulated casualties. This time, it reached President Kennedy. His answer was simple: no. Kennedy had already been burned by the Bay of Pigs invasion and had little interest in manufacturing another conflict. He wanted diplomacy with Cuba, not deception. Within months, General Lemnitzer was removed as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Officially, it was a reassignment to NATO command in Europe. Unofficially, many historians viewed it as a quiet removal from influence. Operation Northwoods was shelved, locked away inside government archives where few people were ever expected to see it again. The plan disappeared from public knowledge, but the documents survived. For decades, Operation Northwoods remained buried in classified archives. Most Americans had no idea the proposal had ever existed. Then, in 1997, the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board began releasing thousands of previously hidden government documents. Among them was the Northwoods file. When the documents became public, the reaction was explosive. Historians were stunned. Journalists demanded answers, and conspiracy communities pointed to Northwoods as proof that governments were capable of deception on a massive scale. The paperwork was undeniable. Official Department of Defense letterheads, operational timelines, military signatures. For many Americans, the most disturbing part wasn't the plan itself. It was how routine the language sounded. The proposals were written with the cold precision of ordinary military planning. No emotion, no hesitation, just logistics. The declassification raised uncomfortable questions. If a proposal like Northwoods could reach the highest levels of military leadership, what other operations had remained hidden? How many plans were approved that the public never learned about? And how close had Northwoods come to becoming reality? There were no clear answers, but the documents proved one thing beyond doubt. Elements within the government had once considered sacrificing innocent lives to achieve strategic objectives. The only thing that stopped the operation was a president willing to reject it. Operation Northwoods was never carried out, but its legacy never disappeared. Over time, the document became a symbol of public distrust toward governments and intelligence agencies. Whenever major political violence occurs, someone inevitably asks the same question: could there be another Northwoods? The operation also forced historians to reevaluate parts of the Cold War narrative. For decades, the conflict had often been framed as a battle between freedom and tyranny. But Northwoods complicated that image. It revealed that American officials were willing to consider tactics they publicly condemned in rival nations. Some historians argue the proposal was an extreme outlier. After all, it was rejected. No attacks occurred. No civilians were harmed. But others see the situation differently. They point out that the Joint Chiefs did not casually brainstorm the idea. They drafted detailed operational plans, presented them to civilian leadership, and revised them after initiate. That was more than a theoretical discussion. It was preparation. And Northwoods did not emerge in isolation. The Cold War era was filled with covert operations that would only become public decades later. Programs like COINTELPRO, CIA mind control experiments under MKUltra, and secret operations during the Vietnam War revealed a pattern of actions hidden from public oversight. Northwoods stands apart for one reason: the evidence survived. Typed pages, official signatures, a permanent historical record of how close democratic governments can come to crossing dangerous lines. Today, inside the National Archives, the Operation Northwoods documents sit in a folder marked Top Secret, Declassified. The paper has yellowed with age, the ink has faded, but the words remain. A reminder that the line between national security and national betrayal can become dangerously thin. And sometimes, the only thing standing between a proposal and reality is a single person willing to say no.